We're back with another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm Emily Jashinsky, Culture Editor here at the Federalist. As always, you can email the show at radio@thefederalist.com. Follow us on Twitter at FDRLST. Make sure to subscribe wherever you download your podcasts as well. Today, I'm joined by two of my lovely colleagues, Senior Editor Christopher Bedford and Assistant Editor Kylee Zempel. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Chris, I know there's a lot on your mind right now. You are actually just sort of like boiling over with anger about the possibility of vaccine passports, which we have covered on the podcast before. But your perspective on this, or I guess the sort of salient argument from your perspective, is that Republican politicians, we've seen this already hitting states individually, like New York and Florida. We've seen governors have to make decisions about vaccine passports in various forms. Why is this? Why does this have you so fired up about Republicans, the opportunity for them to make a decision on these?
So the first thing is this is happening. Vaccine passports are happening. They will affect you at your home.
Can you define vaccine passport, by the way? Because there are a lot of different definitions.
Documents, digital, most likely. Right now, it's all digital. That you must present to either your employer or to an airline or to an agency or wherever else, to a business, in order to gain access to that place that shows that you've been vaccinated. Right now, in their current form, they don't even include, the actually traditional normal antibodies of having had the disease. But that's what a vaccine passport is. It's basically your personal biometric data and your medical history presented if you want to buy a candy bar from some crackhead in Massachusetts. Now,
so go ahead.
So if you read the New York Times or watch CNN or read the LA Times, and I don't pay for the LA Times, but I sneak on sometimes, they will tell you over and over again that this is not a problem. Oh, we don't know why Republicans, they keep on doing this stuff, this grandstanding. Wow, but there are no vaccine passports. Well, and this is the Joe Biden and Jen Psaki, who, by the way, have lied. We carry this on the website. I mean, as many times as the last administration and the one before it, at least. But they said that they're not going to do it. At the same time, they have their doctors coming out saying, we're going to work with corporations to help them accomplish this. That's what we're looking at, a government corporate alliance for these databases. It's not going to be like the DMV, most likely. But if you take a step back in time, this is happening right now. IBM won a contract from the National Institute of Health last fall. Within a month, they had put out their first version of a tracker. This is a tracker that New York use for their pass, that the Excelsior pass. New York's the first state to actually have one. Germany worked with IBM to do this. South Korea worked with a different company that's in South Korea to do this. Whole countries are beginning to do this. IBM is working with the European Union, which said that they're going to have a pass out by June. MasterCard is doing this. Companies over and over and over again, Salesforce, different companies that you deal with in your business all the time are doing this. And their main thing is, let's let people go back to the office. So now in order to go to the office, you have to submit yourself to this completely experimental long-term vaccine.
Or to college.
Go to college? Oh, yeah, or to go to college.
Colleges are thinking about this too. Or
sometimes just to go shopping at a business. You have to be able to do this. Now, we have no idea what this stuff does to someone who wants to have children someday in the future, or to someone who is pregnant. We know that in 1 month, even though this is basically a statistical anomaly so far, in 1 month it's associated with 6 blood clots and a fatality. It's not exactly reassuring, but it's not the end of the world. Suddenly statistics matter to the left. A friend of mine who's in Virginia, she's the mother of one, a young woman. Her and her husband want to have another child. She's been told by her office, a lobbying firm, that she can't travel for work until she gets her vaccine passport or her vaccination. She doesn't want to do that. If you don't travel for work in your job, you lose out. You don't get contracts. It's a whole system of creating second-class citizens. And all these fruitcake, sissy, I believe in Reagan and Buckley, bullshit Republicans out there in almost every state are saying, well, we've come out and said that we're not going to do it. But who are we to stop small businesses from forcing our citizens to get, if they want to do commerce, to get a shot put it in their body, inject it, and then submit their biometric data to a database. They've said, well, we're not going to do it. The government's not going to do it. So you're okay. BS. IBM is going to do it. Whether it's Cisco Systems, I don't think they're working on anything yet. MasterCard's going to do it. The airlines are going to do it. Foreign countries are going to do it. And they're going to demand your citizens do this. And the people who are vulnerable in your state are either going to be coerced into it, or they're going to be made second-class citizens, or they're going to do it happily. And maybe they would do it anyways. And if not, they're denied access to commerce. And these sissy Republicans who just grandstand and say, I gave a speech against it, I'm fine, are not protecting their vulnerable citizens. And they're falling back and saying, well, it's small business. It's small business. Bullshit. Small business can't build this database. Mm-hmm. They can't do it. They need IBM to do it, or you, the government. You said you're not doing it, so now IBM's building it. And have we never heard of HIPAA? The only states so far that have come out against this strongly are Montana, which said no business in the state can ask for this except for those who are covered by HIPAA, like nursing homes and doctors. And Florida, who said the exact same thing. And Texas did their kind of classic corporate libertarian style, which is any business that takes money from the government. That includes caterers and restaurants, things like that, has to not ask for vaccine passports. Every other state is just trying to pretend, well, we did this. It's like watching on repeat that Tucker Carlson interview with the governor who got rid of the chemical castration bill. What's his name?
Asa Hutchinson.
It's like watching Asa Hutchinson. Well, I've studied the issue and it's not a problem. Bullshit. And it's coming. So that was way longer than you asked for. That's my rant.
A full-on rant. That was a monologue. My eyes glazed over as you spoke.
I'll have a sip of bourbon. Calm down.
Yes. You can probably hear his glass clinking in the background. Kylee, are you as concerned as Chris?
I am, and I don't understand why. I mean, I understand in light of things like the Tucker interview with Asa Hutchinson, but I don't understand why Republicans aren't fighting this more. I mean, am I wrong to say this is a complete winning issue for Republicans? Like, it's like we have amnesia from, a couple months ago. Are they forgetting who 75 million Americans voted for? Like, why are more people not following the DeSantis method?
I think it's against their nature. Republicans do not like to rebel against business. They like to do campaign emails against the Chamber of Commerce, but they don't want to fight the Chamber of Commerce ever. They're business people, and they believe the GOP do whatever business says. And some of these places that want to do it are small businesses. Like, I don't know, your old lady owns a candy shop, and she wants you to have this vaccine. So they're saying, well, who are we to make any business mandate? And that's a false argument.
You're talking about GOP leaders, like your typical GOP leaders, the people who have been in GOP politics for a while. When I say, am I wrong to say it's a winning issue?
No, you're right.
For voters. Like, this is... Most Americans, I mean, I'm from Wisconsin. I was just there. Americans in flyover country, a lot of them are still hesitant to take the vaccine. And then they see the Johnson & Johnson thing and are like, yep, we're right. We're good. Beyond that, I mean, they're terrified of vaccine
Jimmy
passports.
and Johnny vaccine?
Correct. Yeah.
I disagree. I mean, I think, first of all, there is a consideration when it does come to the small businesses, and I don't know what way there would be to legally make distinctions, but I do think that... Sure. And I do think that when, as I've observed, and we've all observed what has happened over the lockdowns in terms of the crashing of the economic opportunities and the way that has impacted people's mental health, the way that has impacted people's drinking and drug habits and suicide, et cetera, go down the line. I think finding a way to get small businesses open to the point where they're legally comfortable with it, there's something to be said for that. That's not to say I don't think vaccine passports, as they're called, are wrong. But I also disagree with Kylie's point that this is a winning issue for Republicans, because Tristan Justice, our other colleague, and I have talked about this before, but I kind of feel like we have one segment of the country during the pandemic became more and more dependent on the government because they trust their neighbors less. They trust everyone less.
Oh, yeah,
and
we're all in this together.
They want to be told what to do.
Right.
I just think there are a lot of people now, it was already happening before the pandemic, but a lot of people now that actually just sort of crave the instruction and control of the government in a way that they didn't before.
But if we're talking about having, Republican leaders with spines, that should be a winning issue for them. When I say it's a winning issue with voters, I mostly mean with Republican voters,
so
not with with the increasingly government dependent, COVID terrified.
So what a lot of these guys are hoping, and what they're saying, because they don't want to pick a fight. And they think it's a mandate to ban. And they think it's actually, they're coming at this like it's a right. It's a right of a small business owner to say, I'm not doing commerce with you unless you give me access to your medical records and take an experimental vaccine.
Okay, so explain why that's not a right. Give me the legal argument. It does exist. I just want you, like, what is the legal argument for why that's not a right?
Because it compels them to action. That's what the businesses are what's doing a mandate. So we have mandates in our society.
Right.
If you need to hit 18 years old or 16 years old or 15 years old, depending on where you are, sometimes 14, to drive.
Yep.
You cannot marry a child. You need to reach. Someone needs to reach a certain age of maturity. We have mandates. There are drinking ages. There are tobacco ages. Some of those are forced on the states by the federal government. But
in terms of private businesses, there's the Civil Rights Act. I mean, that's
over. I'm just pushing at things that we would consider conservative, like you can't marry children, you can't have multiple spouses. These are bans that we have put on society, or you have to reach a certain age in order to run for office, in order to vote. These are things that we have put on. We've decided them societally. But a business telling people, denying commerce, in a lot of these states that are Republican or are red, they're not the cities as much. They're not the booming downtowns. A lot of these places, when I was out in Michigan, there was a bar, there was a couple of liquor stores, there was a nice restaurant, and there was a Walmart. Like, that's where you did your shopping. And I was out there for a few weeks. If Walmart says that they need a COVID vaccine, then everyone in that town has to get one. And not everyone wants one. But these businesses have no right to ask for your private medical data. If they're not covered by HIPAA and the protections that are privacy and the protections that are surround that, they have no right to do that. And if in order to feel comfortable selling candy bars or groceries or car washes or what have you to a customer, you need access to their medical history, then you have no business being in business.
It's also just funny to think through the logistical changes of this. So, you're going to have your businesses that are not going to try to require vaccine passports because they, don't believe in that. But
that's what Republican voters are hoping for. The governors, they're saying, people won't go to those businesses that require it.
But that hasn't been the case with masks, which is a really good, litmus test for where things will go with vaccine passports. But it's funny because, we've seen as the vaccine has been rolled out, have any of the businesses that that had mask mandates for the last year, have any of them loosened their mask mandates because now there's a vaccine that a lot of Americans have had? No.
None.
The same, you're talking about, people feeling comfortable. It's like, okay, so you're going to require a vaccine passport. Does that mean you're going to open to fuller capacity? Probably not.
And I don't feel comfortable taking an experimental vaccine. Actually, I do. I don't care. But I wouldn't want my daughter taking that. I wouldn't want my wife taking that. Unless we were older, and then it didn't matter. For my parents, my dad's got a bunch of comorbidities. He's going to take that so he can have some more freedom of movement. But he's not going to require other people to take that or young people to take that. And that's what's insane. And a lot of these businesses, I try not to get mad at them because they're catering to their most neurotic customers. And most of these businesses, especially restaurants, they're struggling. Does the waiter think that you're going to get COVID if I don't wipe down your chair? No, he doesn't. But some moonbat psychopath who lives next to me on Capitol Hill absolutely thinks they're going to get COVID. So he wipes it down so the idiot feels safe. And that's what I think is going to be part of this. And worse yet, it's going to continue where it's not like right now, it's a mandate. You show your vaccine, you show your digital passport, shows that you're a citizen in good standing. This is the path to a social credit system. Corporate government alliances that keep track of your history and do the right virtue signals. And it's not going to stop with COVID.
Okay, so that I agree with. I very much agree that this creates the infrastructure for a social credit system that, by the way, it's infrastructure that is increasingly dangerous because of the way that we define certain things like bigotry, the way that we define certain concepts, white supremacy, insurrection, et cetera, et cetera. You could go down the list. The people who would be in control of the social credit system, whichever form it takes as it emerges, have these like very insidious definitions, and they do sweep the rest of the country, any sort of ideological dissent into these categories.
My staff don't feel comfortable serving your table if you haven't taken a critical race theory course.
Oh yeah, no. Like
Your
that's
microaggressions.
That's absolutely something to be concerned about. And when you start creating a system like this, it's very easy to plug other things into it at a different point in time. And so, yeah, I definitely have that concern.
And what reasonable COVID restrictions have we had past the first maybe month?
Right.
Once we started to get data outside of the third world, so like beyond Italy and China, no offense, Italy, I'm kidding. We started to realize this is not the Black Plague, but restrictions have only continued. I mean, the CDC just freaking told Michigan they need 2 weeks to slow the curve. Am I allowed to say retarded? No.
You've done it before.
Okay. Are they retarded? Like, do they think that we just don't remember? Yeah, I know people have, they don't remember much. But we did the 2 weeks to slow the curve. Even Whitmer said no, and she's horrendous.
That's true. She did do that.
But this thing will absolutely continue, and there's not a single one of our measures that we have taken as a country, besides like early travel bans with China, et cetera, that have been handled correctly, been handled responsibly, and been handled in a way that wasn't complete overkill and control for little Eichmanns.
Well, and I wouldn't believe it if government or corporations said it anyway, but have they even tried to give any kind of guarantee that any other restrictions would go away if you flashed a vaccine passport? I mean,
Nope.
the safer we've gotten, it doesn't matter. The restrictions are just as harsh. I mean, masks are still required everywhere. Vaccines are still being pushed. Like, if maybe people would be more willing to accept a vaccine passport, they shouldn't. But if they knew that once they got their vaccine, they could be trusted not to wear a mask in every private or public building everywhere, and like, that's not the case. So, you get a vaccine passport so you can travel. Okay, you're still packed on an airplane the same way you were before you got your vaccine passport, and you're still wearing masks. Like,
and the planes
they're not concerned about safety, right? And that's a big one.
They've told us, because people need planes to travel. Travel is affordable to everyone.
Which is a big second-class citizen problem, because if you can't travel, that's a problem.
Or most people, it's available to. If you got a big family, you definitely can't hop on an airplane. You're driving. But airplanes have told us over the last year that they are literally the safest place to be. And now I need a vaccine to board for safety? I thought you said that this was safe. And the airplanes, of course, have come up with some. I'm sorry, I was cussing earlier, guys. They've come up with so many silly rules because, like, for example, I've flown a lot during COVID. You can't stand up and pull your bag out until the row in front of you moves, because you might get COVID. We've been sitting on top of each other for 3 hours, but I can't stand up. Oh yeah, the restaurant rule. If I'm sitting, no COVID. And this is the next thing. Etihad's doing it. Air Italia, which is not how you say it, Italia or whatever. Air France is doing it. These companies, and that companies like Delta, United, American will probably want to do this. And if they got a hub in Dallas, Texas, they take money from the government to have that hub. There's no way they're going to get away with this, because Texas is saying no, and we need more governors to come out and put a stop to this.
Is there a world in which, or not a world, is there a possibility that if we had this pandemic pre 9/11, before the spying infrastructure in this country was created, there would have been, outrage over even the thought? Has the American psyche changed to a point where we're numb to these government intrusions into our life? Or am I sort of conflating two things that aren't alike in terms of vaccine passports and, let's say, the NSA or big tech? We have all of these. For me, we were actually just talking about this today with some folks on our email list about how, so I was born in 1993. By the time I got to high school, it was sort of an inevitability. And people, I remember our teachers.
Humble brag there, by the way.
Yeah. Our teachers were really excited. I did graduate high school. I'm bragging about it, but our teachers were really excited to get us online, right? Like, that was a really cool thing. And there was this inevitability about, I don't know if Kylie's younger than me, and I think probably had a similar experience where everything went online. And so after a certain point, I just kind of made peace with it. And I'm not averse to having like an Alexa in my house, because I've, again, like made peace with the fact that there's nothing I can do to reverse.
Just listening to you.
Right. But there's nothing I can do to reverse the data that before we knew any better, when we were naive, and when people like Kylee and I were younger, it just all went there. And I wonder if you guys think that there's kind of a numbness to this that might be influencing the lack of, I guess, outrage from people, even people on the left. I think I just asked a really good question because you're so silent.
I'm just thinking about it. I don't know, because I see such varied responses to this that it's hard to know, is it a generational thing? Like, are millennials and Gen Zers more numb to it than older people? Or, is it a generational thing depending on how much of your life is already basically completely public to the world? Or is it, is it more related to events like 9/11? I'm not really sure.
I don't see a 9/11 comparison as much as I see if the people who are convinced that the government is doing the right thing to deal with a threat will allow the government very broad latitude to deal with that threat. By and large, you have to think really hard about it and have just a lot of time to think, to be able to sit back and say, well, I think this is a problem. I think we need the government's help on this, but I don't want them to go too far because I'm concerned about my liberty. And it's really sad, the American response. It's depressed me greatly how little spirit and fire we've had, how many things we've taken on the sitting down, how we've just been like slowly, the water has slowly been turned up to boil and we haven't gotten out of the pot. Many of us, not all of us, you go with the two huge swaths of the country and they don't give a darn about COVID. There's no convincing them about it. I walked into a bar in a rural part of the Rust Belt and everyone stopped and looked at me. A couple bars also in Colorado this happened. And the bartender barked, "We don't have COVID here." And I took off my mask happily. And I sat down at a bar and had a brew. It was great. Didn't die then. The American people have generally given into this because so many of them are afraid. And people are broken. And there are some people who are irreparably broken. And the poor children I passed playing in the playground with masks on because they were told to when I was walking over here, they're going to grow up broken. They're missing smiles. They're missing expressions. And, they're the children of people in D.C., so they probably are already way on the spectrum. And this ain't going to help them. Their parents, I see people, my neighbors, I'm out there gardening, put a mask on inside their home, come outside of their home, get the mail that's not at the end of their driveway. It's on their porch. Go back inside and take the mask off. That is a level of fear and brokenness that I don't think can be undone. And it's psychological trauma. And we don't even, people like, you should deal with psychological trauma, like go to church and love your family and find your roots. But these people are all going to go to psychotherapists and all these other people. And who here has actually met a psychologist or who wasn't completely insane and just I want to help people like I was helped. All the crazies are in psychology, so it's going to make it even worse.
Well, no, I think there's a really good point there, and I'm very curious what Kylee experienced the pandemic largely, for the most part, outside of the Beltway in Wisconsin, and I'm curious if
it's so nice there.
It is nice.
I love
it. Wonderful.
Beef sticks for days.
Beef sticks. Yes, the gas
it's
station.
All I ate for a year.
Cheese curds.
Yeah. No, the gas station beef sticks with a cheese stick. Chris was introduced to those
at 5 in the morning.
Yeah,
and
totally
I
fair.
cursed them off. I was so annoyed that we didn't have time to stop. John Daniel Davidson's just happily eating cheese curds on our bro trip across the country for the Federalist. Yeah. After a while, I got hungry enough. I was like, give me that. And it was great.
Yeah.
Not buffalo flavored. I like buffalo flavored everything, not buffalo flavored cheese.
I'm just done with this conversation, Chris. Even though I realize I started it. Anyways, so Kylee, is it much worse? So I think Chris and we both get out of the Beltway, but it's hard when you're here to always be totally in touch with everyday life in the rest of the country. And I wonder if you have a similar reaction to me, where I actually really do think that this Chris was talking about the masks and the mask police that we've seen in communities all over the country.
Just soft, ill people screeching at you.
Right. Mm-hmm. So how divided is the rest of the country over the sort of fear versus freedom dynamic, right? Where there are a lot of people who prefer to have their fear become policy, or they want their fear to become government mandate, and other people who prefer their freedom, and they may still be afraid, but they prefer their freedom. So I wonder what you think that is like outside of places like DC, where Chris was yelled at for not wearing a mask.
It's night and day. And these are people too who they don't work on the Hill. They don't eat, sleep, and breathe public policy. They don't know the ins and outs of a vaccine passport. But when they hear that, their initial reaction is I don't want that. It's freedom is their first impulse, not safety. They care about their privacy. They care about their freedom. They don't want someone else to keep them safe because they've been doing it themselves for generations and, would rather take care of their own families and make their own health decisions. That's been my experience in rural Wisconsin, where, a number of people got COVID, had all the classic symptoms, never went to the doctor or got diagnosed with it or planned to take a vaccine or anything of that kind. They don't want people to know their business, and they don't want help being safe in their private health decisions. So, right. You go just slightly to a different area, like Madison, Wisconsin, which is in Dane County, very, very leftist. Yeah. And that's a completely different story, but it's still nothing like the Beltway, but people are in masks outside, and the rules are insane. Every business requires a mask. I mean, the restrictions are very high. You can't be next to this person at the bar. They're taking your temperature when you enter, any establishment. It's completely different
because
from rural
of all the
America.
mentally ill people who live here.
That's right.
I found it so refreshing to walk in Milwaukee, and we put our masks on in every business we go to because my friend's from New York City and I'm from DC, and we just assumed that was the manners. I'm just being polite. I don't care. I didn't care if I got COVID. I eventually did. Very generous. Gave it to my friends.
Mm-hmm. You sure did.
Too soon. People said, well, be careful with that. People will scream at you for wearing a mask around here. I was like, really? We were shocked. Like, there were anti-mask shamers. We walked out. I just hadn't taken it off yet. Like, I can't wait to take that thing off. And someone goes, take that commie diaper off your face. I was like, that was awesome. Mm-hmm. I happily did. And she smiled. I'm like, thank you.
There's also this understanding where people in that part of the country, they don't trust people in the Beltway. They don't trust the people making these decisions for them. And so I think when they have, the mask Karens staring at them, judging them or being angry or calling them out. My mom's gotten called out in, shopping at TJ Maxx or whatever she's doing. And it's like people like that would rather be judged by someone that they think is insane than be seen with a mask on their face and get called out for having a commie diaper.
Well, and I think that
it's just a completely different mindset.
That to me really speaks to the fact that there is a divide, whether it's between Madison and rural Wisconsin or the Beltway and rural Wisconsin, whatever it is, it exists.
Wisconsin.
And let's end on this question, which is the most difficult question that we can ask of all of this, because Chris brought up, people are going to go to their, Freudian psychiatrists, et cetera, and not get, the psychological trauma, as Chris dubbed it.
You're right to sit in the bathtub, drink wine, and sob all day. You deserve a you day.
You should get a cat. So
go
anyway,
to work.
You should get 2 cats, and you should name them Thelma and Louise. Anyway, so you should start a Pinot Grigio line called Thelma and Louise Pinot Grigio. I feel like I'm giving Chris a business idea. I need to stop.
I think Chris is going to be a shrink.
Anyway, so my point is there is something to be said here for we have undergone a national trauma to some extent.
Self-inflicted.
Yeah, self-inflicted national trauma, psychological scarring. And it's not going to be dealt with in a way that it would have been in this country, perhaps in the past, when there was, I guess, a stronger Judeo-Christian ethic, when there was higher religiosity, when our institutions were stronger, when our civic institutions and our communities were stronger. What do you make of that dynamic? How do you think that leaves the American people going forward? I'll pose that to both of you, and we'll just start with Kylee.
I mean, I think that's the answer. Like, people are not going to find their help in someone's office or, in the news or on social media or anything. Like, there are cures to people's social ills, and they're not going to find them where they're looking for them. One thing that I do think is problematic that we've talked about with Chris quite a bit is just the problem of even in the traditional places where people would get, the kind of mental and spiritual help that they need, even many of those places have become just reminders that there's a pandemic and more harbors of COVID fears, like the church. And so that's not going to be helpful in people overcoming these so-called traumas. But we're not going to find them where we're looking for them, and it makes me really, really scared for where we're headed.
Right.
Priests and ministers, there's not many priests, fortunately, who still have their churches closed, who had their churches closed 6 months ago, should be sentenced to 3 days exposure on the North Wall. I mean, you should just be hang out. Like you go out there and you think about what you did, because you are a frontline worker. You are needed by people. If Americans had spent or the world had spent the last year giving a darn about their spiritual health at half the level that they gave a darn about their physical health, we'd all be saints by now. We'd be elect. It'd be unreal. But we haven't. We've given all this away. Our last civic leaders in the church, etc., have decided that they are subservient to bureaucrats, largely. Not all of them. There are some really brave examples. Otherwise, they've shut their doors. They've said, you do this, you do that, render unto Caesar. It's like, we're not dealing with Nero right now. We're dealing with fake Caesars and wannabes and stupid, sweaty bureaucrats who are trying to teach our kids anti-Christian messages in schools that we pay for. Our shepherds have fled essentially when the wolves have come there, and it's been really shameful. Our technology, though, Emily, has really destroyed our defenses on this.
Yep.
I mean, the reality is, like, private clubs in big cities are declining because I have a cell phone and there are new restaurants. I can text who I want to see and I can meet them there. Also, my wife can find me anywhere I am, or my girlfriend, or
you
whoever.
mean your cat?
Wow.
I nailed that one.
They can find you anywhere you are. You don't have to go to the same club. You don't have to go to the Elks Club or the VFW or the Legions or the whatever club to meet up with your friends and know they're going to be there and get a good meal. You also no longer have to hang out with your neighbors. I mean, every single sitcom, an old comic strip and everything has a neighbor that the guy that they don't like. Like half the stuff is dad grumbling at somebody who they don't like, but it's part of every scene because they are your neighbors. They are your community. We don't need to do that. I can call 5 friends, hop in an Uber, come by. I'm picking up some dinner. So community is completely corroded. A lot of local community, not completely. And a lot of rural areas, it's still different. And my neighborhood, fortunately, is great. We've got a lot of back and forth before COVID. But all of that now, like, the shattering and the weakening communities have been shattered by mutual mistrust, and that whole spirit of help people has gone into protect yourself. And I don't think that the United States has the tools in a lot of these blue states to recover. And some of the red states, fortunately, never subjected themselves to the psychological trauma, and they'll be okay. But this has accelerated the decline of the United States, which, if you're a Christian, don't worry about it. It's all just chasing the wind. But if you have children who you're trying to raise and you want to have grandchildren, it's a problem and it's a worry that you have to fight for.
It's a worry that you have to fight for, right? For the sort of country that you grew up in to be preserved for people down the line. And I think even the country that I feel like I grew up in is gone. And I feel like that happened really quickly. That isn't to say that it can't come back. I think Chris's perspective that if you're a Christian, you don't have to worry is good. I also think there is, the rock bottom phenomena that is possibly the saving grace here, right? That in America, we do have these documents like the Constitution that
we passed those a long time ago.
Those are racist
they
documents.
Hang themselves in a truck stop bathroom.
Yeah, racist documents of white supremacy, patriarchal white supremacy, I should say, cisgender patriarchal white supremacy and racism. But anyway,
I don't think those guys were cis. They had stockings, breeches, and powdered wigs.
Yeah, it's a totally fair debate. Listen, I've seen Hamilton.
Maybe John Adams.
Anyway, so there is the possibility of the rock bottom phenomena kicking in, and in a country where you do have sort of the best working Republican system that we've ever seen grace the face of this earth, people can. Oh my gosh! Take his bourbon from him. He's too depressing.
We have a democracy now. It's a mob rule.
Yeah, yeah.
For real.
No, it's actually an oligarchy.
Touche.
But anyway, I mean, I guess there's always the possibility that you see this kind of happening in California. The excesses of cultural leftism are really sparking a backlash that is getting more potent, I think, by the month. But on that note, any final thoughts from my colleagues here as we wrap up this edition of the Federalist Radio Hour?
Well, I just was going to say, Chris is right that, another reason why I'm skeptical is because this is not actually a COVID problem. This is a trajectory that we were on before. It reminds me of Tim Carney's book, Alienated America, which is just that, we have dashed these institutions and these communities to the ground far before COVID, and that just exacerbated it. So, while while I would love to believe that the rock bottom phenomenon is a thing, sadly, I don't really see that being the case here.
It's real, but anyone who's ever, known and loved a drug addict or an alcoholic knows that there are like 9 rock bottoms. You're like, oh, this is definitely it.
This is it.
Wow, this is it. You can't get it. Whoop, there he goes off the cliff.
And
okay, wow. It's like Wile E. Coyote or something, or Ren and Stimpy, down.
There's
boom,
always
boom.
another rock
There's
bottom.
always another cliff to fall off of.
Yeah.
And a rock bottom for one person is different than a rock bottom for,
Yeah, I got it in me for another jump.
in America.
Oh boy.
But, hey, listen, the weather is great. And that is actually one thing that is, I think, going to help liberate some of this COVID stuff.
I hope
Because even the biggest wusses want to come outside and breathe the air and go for a jog.
Oh yeah, you can feel it here in DC.
I don't jog.
You can feel it here
you
when you
tell?
run past all the
E-bike.
joggers in masks.
No, you actually can. So Kylee, you have missed how many people have been jogging in masks, and that's already a little bit different. So that's sort of the sliver of hope that
We'll
I'm
take you on
clinging
a
to.
tour.
Yeah, it's not great.
They're killing their brain cells, and which is, fine.
Well, anyway, you have been listening to another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm Emily Jashinsky, culture editor here at the Federalist, joined by my colleagues, Kylee Zempel, assistant editor, and Christopher Bedford, senior editor at the Federalist. We will be back soon with more. Until then, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.